I sat in the break room of the beauty salon, the warm hum of the wax heaters drifting faintly from the treatment rooms nearby. The familiar scent of lavender and chamomile-infused oils hung in the air, soothing, comforting. It was a scent I had come to associate with long days filled with nervous clients, soothing conversations, and the delicate art of making people feel at ease while I worked on their most vulnerable areas. I liked my job, or at least I liked the part of it that involved making people feel better about themselves. Some clients were shy, their nervous laughter or averted eyes making it clear that exposing themselves even partially in front of me wasn't their idea of a fun afternoon. Others were bold, unfazed by anything, treating the process like a routine haircut. I had learned to read people quickly, knowing who needed reassurance and who preferred silence. It was like second nature now. At 42, life felt predictable, but I wasn't complaining. I had an 18-year-old son, Ethan, who was the light of my life. He had his father's broad shoulders and my brown eyes, and though he was fiercely independent, he had a tenderness that always caught me off guard. He had recently started dating a girl named Lily, a sweet, artistic girl who seemed to adore him. Every time she came over, she brought baked goods wrapped in neatly tied ribbon, the scent of chocolate or cinnamon filling the house. I liked her, but there was a part of me, one I wasn't proud of, that felt an inexplicable pang every time she laughed at something Ethan said or leaned her head against his shoulder on the couch. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was becoming someone else, someone I was struggling to hold on to. I shook my head, dismissing the thought as I finished my coffee. A knock on the break room door made me glance up. It was Heather, one of the younger estheticians. "Hey Linda," she said, peeking her head in. "Your 3 p.m. is here. Bikini wax." "Thanks, Heather," I replied, standing up and smoothing my uniform. As I headed to the treatment room, I tried to push the swirling thoughts of my son aside. Work was a good distraction, and for the next hour I could focus on something I could control. That evening, the smell of marinara sauce filled the kitchen as I stirred a pot of pasta. Ethan was sitting at the island, scrolling through his phone. His hair was still damp from his shower, curling slightly at the edges. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. "Busy," I said, tasting the sauce and adding a pinch of salt. "Had a few nervous first-timers today. But overall it was fine." He grinned. "You must be a pro at calming people down by now." "I try." I smiled, but the ease of our conversation made me realize how rare moments like these were becoming. Between his school, his girlfriend, and his part-time job, we didn't get much time alone anymore. "Lily coming over tonight?" asked, hoping my tone was casual. He shook his head. "Nah, she's busy with a project. Thought I'd stay in and hang out with you if that's okay." My heart lifted at his words. "Of course it's okay. I'll take all the time I can get with you." After dinner, we settled on the couch to watch a movie, an old comedy that used to make him laugh until he cried when he was a kid. As the opening credits rolled, he shifted closer, his arm brushing against mine. It felt like old times, back when he'd rest his head on my shoulder and fall asleep halfway through the movie. Halfway through, I glanced over at him. His laughter had softened, his face illuminated by the flickering glow of the TV. He looked content, relaxed, something I hadn't seen in a while. I reached over and ruffled his hair the way I used to when he was little. He chuckled, batting my hand away playfully. "You still do that," he said, smiling. "Old habits die hard." For a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, the movie forgotten. I could feel the warmth of his presence beside me, the steady rise and fall of his breath. It was moments like this that reminded me of how deeply intertwined our lives had been for so long. But now things were shifting. He was growing up, falling in love, creating a life outside of me. The thought of him leaving someday, really leaving, tightened something in my chest. I knew it was natural, that it was part of being a parent, but it didn't make it any easier. "You okay, Mom?" His voice was soft, concerned. I blinked, realizing I had been staring at the TV without really seeing it. "Yeah, sweetie. Just tired, I guess." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on me, as if he could sense the emotions I wasn't saying aloud. Sometimes he was too perceptive for his own good. As the credits rolled, he stretched and yawned. "I think I'm gonna head up to bed." I watched him disappear up the stairs, the sound of his footsteps fading. For a long time I sat there, the house settling into a quiet hum around me. The warmth of the evening lingered, but so did the ache of knowing that these moments were fleeting. Tomorrow he would go back to school, back to Lily, back to the life that didn't revolve around me. And I would go back to work, to the hum of wax heaters and the scent of lavender oil, and to clients who needed me to help them feel at ease. But tonight I had him. And for now that was enough. Next day came. I had just finished cleaning up the treatment room when I glanced at the clock. My last appointment was scheduled for 6 p.m., and I figured it would be another client looking to squeeze in some self-care before the weekend. I tidied up the supplies, my thoughts drifting to Ethan. He had left that morning without much conversation, saying something about meeting Lily for coffee and running errands. I assumed I wouldn't see him until the next day. With the waxing table prepped and the room smelling faintly of warm honey and essential oils, I walked to the front desk to check the appointment details. As I was about to scan the schedule, the bell over the entrance chimed, signaling the arrival of my final client. I looked up, expecting to see a stranger or one of my regulars. Instead I saw Ethan. He stood there, casually dressed in jeans and a fitted black t-shirt, his backpack slung over one shoulder. For a moment I thought he had just come by to say hello or maybe ask for a ride home. But when his eyes met mine and he gave me that familiar, slightly mischievous smile, something inside me tensed. "Ethan," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, "what are you doing here?" He walked closer, setting his backpack on the bench near the reception area. "I'm your last client," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My breath caught. "What?" He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly aware of my surprise but still maintaining a casual confidence. "I booked the appointment under a different name," he admitted with a small laugh. "Didn't want to make things weird when you saw it on the schedule." I blinked, struggling to process what he was saying. "Ethan, why?" He sighed, his gaze softening. "Lily invited me to stay over tonight," he said, lowering his voice. "Well, I wanted to surprise her. Thought it'd be a good idea to take care of some grooming." The air felt suddenly heavy, the weight of his words settling between us. My mind spun in 1,000 different directions. This wasn't just some casual stop by the salon. It was something far more personal, something I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. "Ethan, I don't think." "Mom," he interrupted gently, stepping closer. "It's fine. Trust you. Who else would I go to for this? Some stranger who'd probably make me feel awkward the whole time." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The rational part of me screamed that this wasn't appropriate, that I should refuse and send him on his way. But the way he stood there, looking so sure of himself, so calm, made me hesitate. There was no embarrassment in his expression, no hint of awkwardness. He was treating this like a normal, everyday favor, like asking me to hem a pair of pants or cut his hair. And maybe that was what made it even more disarming. "Are you sure about this?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. He nodded. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." I exhaled slowly, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter. "Okay," I said, though the word felt foreign on my tongue. "But if you feel uncomfortable at any point, we stop." "Understood. Understood." His smile was soft, reassuring. I led him to the treatment room, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar hum of the wax heater filled the silence, and I busied myself with preparing the supplies, trying to focus on the task at hand rather than the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Ethan sat on the edge of the table, watching me with a calmness that both comforted and unsettled me. "So," I said, clearing my throat, "what exactly do you want done?" He leaned back slightly, propping himself up on his hands. "Just the basics. Chest, stomach. Maybe a bit lower too." The air seemed to thicken, and I felt my cheeks flush. I had done this procedure countless times before, but hearing those words from my son was something else entirely. I forced myself to nod, keeping my professional mask firmly in place. "Okay," I said, grabbing a pair of gloves. "Lie back and we'll start with your chest." He did as I asked, lying down and folding his arms behind his head. His t-shirt was already off, revealing the toned muscles of his chest and the faint dusting of hair that trailed down his abdomen. I had seen him shirtless plenty of times before, at the beach, around the house, but this felt different, more deliberate. I applied the warm wax to his chest, the heat spreading across his skin as I worked in silence. My hands were steady, but my mind wasn't. I couldn't stop thinking about how close we were, how his body responded to my touch in subtle ways, the slight twitch of a muscle, the way his breathing hitched for a moment when the wax first touched him. "You okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," he replied, his eyes closed. "It feels fine." I pressed the strip of cloth onto the wax, smoothing it down before giving it a quick, firm pull. He flinched slightly but didn't make a sound. "See? Not so bad," I said, trying to lighten the mood. He chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "I've had worse. Remember when I fell off my bike and scraped half my body on the pavement?" I laughed softly, grateful for the distraction. "You cried for hours." "Did not," he protested, grinning. As we continued, the tension in the room seemed to ease, replaced by something gentler, more familiar. We talked about everything and nothing. His classes, Lily's obsession with baking, a funny story from his part-time job. It felt almost normal, like any other conversation we'd have over dinner. But beneath the surface, my mind was still racing. When I finished his chest and stomach, I hesitated before speaking. "You said you wanted me to do lower?" He opened his eyes, meeting my gaze. "If you're okay with it." I swallowed hard, my fingers curling slightly around the edge of the waxing pot. Was I okay with it? I wasn't sure. But the trust in his eyes, the way he looked at me as if I was the only person he could turn to, made it impossible to say no. "Okay," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, shifting slightly to give me access. As I worked, I tried to keep my focus purely on the task, blocking out the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. But it wasn't easy. Every brush of my fingers against his skin, every subtle movement, made me feel a weight that I couldn't shake. When it was over, I stepped back, pulling off my gloves and exhaling shakily. "All done." He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, his gaze warm. "I really appreciate it." I forced a smile, though my heart was still racing. "Of course." As he gathered his things and left the room, I sank into the nearest chair, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about a favor between mother and son. There was an emotional weight here that I didn't fully understand, and I wasn't sure how to come back from it. When I got home that evening, the house was bathed in the dim golden glow of the setting sun. The light filtered softly through the curtains, casting shadows along the hardwood floor. I slipped off my shoes and set my bag by the door, trying to shake the whirlwind of emotions from earlier at the salon. My hands still trembled faintly, and I felt like I hadn't taken a proper breath since Ethan had walked out of that treatment room. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. "It's fine," I told myself. Asterisk, he's your son. It wasn't anything more than what you do for clients every day, asterisk, but the logic didn't help. My thoughts were stuck in a loop, replaying the warmth of his skin beneath my hands, the way he had trusted me without hesitation, and the way my heart had betrayed me, racing with emotions I wasn't ready to face. I tried to busy myself with mundane tasks, tidying up the living room, loading the dishwasher, and checking my phone for any missed messages. But none of it was enough to drown out the thoughts that gnawed at the back of my mind. A soft thud echoed from upstairs, Ethan's room. He was still home. I hesitated for a moment before making my way up the stairs. My heart thumped harder with each step, like I was approaching something dangerous, something I couldn't control. When I reached the landing, I saw his bedroom door slightly ajar, the faint scent of his cologne wafting into the hallway. That familiar mix of cedarwood and citrus hit me, and for a moment I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by how much everything about him seemed to linger in my senses. Peeking through the door, I saw him standing in front of his mirror, adjusting the collar of a tight black shirt that hugged his frame perfectly. His hair was neatly styled, and the glow of the evening light made him look older, more mature, more confident. The thought unsettled me, like I was watching someone who was no longer entirely mine. He caught my reflection in the mirror and turned around, smiling softly. "Hey Mom," he said, his voice warm and casual. "Just getting ready to head out." I stepped into the room, trying to keep my voice steady. "You look nice." I swallowed hard, hoping he wouldn't notice the tension in my words. "Lily's going to be impressed." He chuckled, giving his shirt one last tug before turning to face me fully. "You think I didn't go too overboard, did I?" "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "You look great." And he did. The black shirt clung to him in all the right ways, accentuating the broadness of his shoulders and the lean lines of his torso. His jeans fit perfectly, and the hint of cologne in the air felt almost intoxicating. I hated myself for noticing. Really noticing, but I couldn't help it. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand and slipped it into his pocket. "Lily and I are just staying in tonight," he said. "She's making dinner." "That sounds nice," I murmured, though the words felt hollow. My mind was too clouded, too full of conflicting emotions. I needed him to leave to give me space to think clearly, but at the same time I dreaded the silence that would follow. As if sensing my unease, he walked over and hugged me. His arms wrapped around me firmly, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. The warmth of his embrace, the familiarity of it mixed with something unfamiliar, something new, left me feeling weightless and heavy all at once. He kissed me lightly on the cheek, the simple gesture igniting a storm inside me. "Don't be sad here without me," he said softly, his breath warm against my skin. "I won't be gone long." I smiled weakly, hoping he couldn't see the turmoil in my eyes. "I'm fine," I lied. "Go have fun." He pulled back, his gaze lingering for a second longer than necessary. "By the way," he added, his tone playful, "I liked today's appointment. You were right, it wasn't so bad." I forced a small laugh. "I'm glad." He grinned. "I think I'll be your regular client from now on." My stomach flipped at the thought, a mix of anxiety and something far more dangerous. "You don't have to do that," I said, trying to sound casual. "There are plenty of other salons." "But I trust you," he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "It's not weird for me, Mom. You make it easy." The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I nodded, unable to find the right response. He trusted me. But the problem wasn't his trust. It was my own feelings, the ones I couldn't seem to suppress no matter how much I tried. "Thanks again," he said, giving my hand a small squeeze before heading toward the door. "See you tomorrow." As the door closed behind him, I sank onto the edge of his bed, my hands trembling in my lap. The sound of his car starting in the driveway was the only thing that brought me back to reality, grounding me in the present. Once the engine faded into the distance, the silence of the house enveloped me. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to acknowledge. Every time I tried to push them away, they resurfaced with even greater intensity. Why did I feel this way? It wasn't normal, and I knew it. Ethan was my son, my little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap, who used to beg me to read him just one more bedtime story. But he wasn't that little boy anymore, and that was the problem. He had grown up, and somewhere along the way, my role in his life had shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. I hated the feelings that had taken root inside me, hated the way my heart raced when I thought about him, the way his presence filled the room and left me breathless. I had always been proud of the bond we shared, the closeness that had carried us through difficult times. But now that bond felt like a double-edged sword, cutting deeper than I could bear. I buried my face in my hands, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I couldn't let this continue. I had to find a way to distance myself, to remind myself of the boundaries that should never be crossed. But even as I sat there, promising myself that tomorrow would be different, a part of me knew it wouldn't be that simple. The feelings were already there, tangled and messy, refusing to be ignored. And the more I tried to suppress them, the more they seemed to grow. I stood up, my legs unsteady as I made my way to my bedroom. The bed felt cold, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. I pulled the blanket around me, hoping that sleep would bring some clarity, some relief. But as I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the warmth of Ethan's hug, the scent of his cologne lingering in the air, and the way he had looked at me before he left. I knew I had to let go of these feelings. But I also knew that doing so would be the hardest thing I had ever done.